Hello, friends. Now listen to me very carefully, because what I am about to tell you is not just another statement. It is a direct and open warning to the entire world. Russian President Vladimir Putin has looked the global community straight in the eye and, without any diplomatic cover or ambiguity, made one thing absolutely clear. If Ukraine and its allied nations do not accept his conditions, if he is not given exactly what he wants, Russia will not stop at the territories it currently occupies. It will take more land by force. In other words, the war that many people around the world had begun to believe might be approaching its end is, according to Putin himself, not ending at all. Instead, it is entering an even more dangerous phase, one that will continue until his demands are met through submission. This was not a rumor, not a leaked document, and not anonymous speculation. This statement was delivered openly on December 17, 2025, during Russia's annual defense ministry meeting, with Putin standing alongside his top generals and military commanders. What the Kremlin's propaganda machine is calling a strategic assessment was, in reality, an ultimatum, an unmistakable threat carefully wrapped in the language of diplomacy and peace. And the most chilling part is this. Putin is no longer even pretending to negotiate in good faith. He is openly signaling that talks, meetings, and peace discussions are merely tools, mechanisms to achieve his objectives without fighting if possible. And if that fails, he will pursue the same goals with even greater violence and military force. This is what is being described as Putin's strategic silence. He is speaking. He is meeting with American envoys. He is sitting through 5-hour discussions with Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff. But he is not negotiating. He is waiting for Western countries to grow tired, waiting for Ukraine to run out of ammunition, waiting for Donald Trump to lose patience and pressure Kiev into accepting a deal that could permanently endanger Ukraine's future. Putin is not silent because he is undecided. He is silent because he has already made his decision. And that decision is based on one belief: that time is on his side. Standing before his senior military leadership, Putin claimed that Russia has secured the strategic initiative across the entire front line, Kremlin language for "we are winning." He boasted that Russia had liberated more than 300 settlements in 2025 and crushed elite Ukrainian military units. The rhetoric was triumphant and confident, but then he pivoted to what truly mattered. What happens if peace talks do not deliver everything he demands? According to Russian state media, Putin said, "We would prefer to eliminate the root causes of this conflict through diplomacy. But if the opposing country and its foreign patrons refuse substantive discussions, Russia will liberate its historical territories through military means." Every word in that sentence is calculated. First, Russia portrays itself as peace-seeking. Then comes the condition of substantive discussions, which in Putin's language means full compliance with Moscow's demands. And finally comes the threat: more territory taken by force. The most dangerous phrase here is historical territories, a deliberately vague term that could include far more than Crimea or Donbass. It is an open-ended justification for expansion. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky immediately recognized the danger, warning that other European countries could one day be labeled historical Russian lands. If the world accepts this logic, it will not stop with Ukraine. It will strike at the foundation of Europe's post-World War II security order. Now, the critical question is this: if Putin's position were truly as strong as he claims, why would he feel the need to issue threats so repeatedly and so publicly? History shows us that leaders who are genuinely winning do not rely on ultimatums. They dictate outcomes. The language Putin is using today reveals less confidence than insecurity. When he says that military force will be used if diplomacy fails, he is signaling that his options are narrowing. If Russia were on the verge of decisive victory, it would not need marathon talks with U.S. envoys, nor constant warnings to Europe, nor repeated reminders of military escalation. This is the moment where Putin's so-called strategic silence breaks, exposing his constraints. Western intelligence assessments indicate that Russia's military is under sustained pressure. Recruitment is becoming increasingly difficult. Forced mobilization is fueling domestic resentment, and anti-war sentiment, though heavily suppressed, has not disappeared. Yet Putin cannot retreat, because retreat would not merely be a military setback, it would be political suicide. In Russia's power structure, leaders who show weakness do not survive. That is why Putin is dragging out negotiations, buying time and betting that the other side will tire first. This is the real danger for the West. If the United States and Europe succumb to fatigue, if they accept the idea that something must be given, they will establish a precedent that reshapes global security. The message would be clear. A nuclear-armed state can violate international law, use mass violence, and eventually be rewarded for it. That is why analysts argue this war is no longer just about Ukraine's borders. It is a test of the rules-based international order itself. If Putin succeeds, the implications extend far beyond Eastern Europe. Tomorrow it could be Taiwan, or another disputed region, facing the same playbook. Western leaders face a difficult but unavoidable choice. Either accept a coerced settlement that guarantees future wars, or clearly demonstrate that territorial conquest will not be rewarded, even if it requires long-term commitment. For Ukraine, continued support is existential. President Zelensky understands that without Western backing, the situation would be dire. But he also knows that a half-measure peace would leave Ukraine permanently vulnerable. That is why he continues to insist that peace must be just to be lasting. Meanwhile, pressure inside Russia is mounting. Ordinary citizens are feeling the economic cost of war. Inflation is rising, social services are strained, and an entire generation faces an uncertain future. Putin attempts to mask these realities with nationalism and external enemy narratives, but history shows that prolonged wars eventually destabilize authoritarian systems. The longer this conflict drags on, the more Russia bleeds resources, manpower, and legitimacy, while Ukraine and the West adapt, coordinate, and strengthen. In the end, the question remains the same. Who runs out of time first? Putin is betting that the West will blink. But if that bet fails, if democratic societies prove capable of endurance, then Putin's entire strategy collapses. This is the crossroads where history is being written, and the outcome will shape not only Ukraine's future, but the future of global stability itself. Now understand what is truly at stake in this entire confrontation, because this is no longer just a war between Russia and Ukraine. It has become a direct stress test of the global order that was painstakingly built after World War II. When Vladimir Putin repeatedly speaks of historical lands, he is openly rejecting the foundation of modern international law, because if every country begins pulling out old maps and claiming territories based on centuries-old history, then no border on Earth remains secure. This is precisely why alarm bells are ringing across Western capitals following Putin's latest statements. Leaders across the European Union have openly described his words as expansionist and imperial in nature, warning that if Russia is not stopped in Ukraine, another country will inevitably be next. The Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, are especially concerned, because Putin has previously framed these regions as part of Russia's traditional sphere of influence. Poland has gone even further, announcing stronger border defenses and increased military readiness, openly stating that history shows Russian threats are rarely just rhetorical. But perhaps the most complex and controversial element in this entire situation is the role of the United States, particularly with Donald Trump once again dominating the political landscape. Trump has repeatedly claimed on the campaign trail that this war would never have started under his leadership, and that he could end it within 24 hours. On the surface, that sounds appealing to war-weary voters, but the real question is at what cost? This is exactly where Putin's strategy becomes clear. He understands that Trump wants a fast diplomatic win, and that public fatigue in the West creates leverage. The Kremlin is betting that Washington will pressure Kiev to accept territorial losses, abandon NATO ambitions, and recognize Russia's so-called security concerns. From the outside, such an agreement would be marketed as peace, but in reality, it would be peace imposed by force.